All right, so we learned a little bit, at least superficially, about the Metzora and a little bit of the process of declaring the Metzora pure. When the signs have gone away and you say that he's no longer impure, and finally he or she, and they can go into the holy temple, the Metzora. And we talked a little bit about Sorat that's in garments. Blue, the red turns to green, green turns to blue, red. And sometimes you have to throw the whole garment away. And we learned about Sorat in houses. Huh? We learned about Sorat that's in houses, and that sometimes it's a very good thing that it comes to remove the, well, it's always, I mean, externally it's always a bad thing, but internally it's a good thing. And sometimes it even comes along with riches. There's riches are in the house, and which were left there by when the Jews took the land over, land of Israel over. So sometimes there would be the Amorites, it says, they would hide their treasures in the walls of the houses, and thinking that maybe the Jews wouldn't come, maybe the Jews wouldn't make it. And when they did make it, so they figured, okay, maybe the Jews won't succeed. When the Jews made it and they succeeded, so they ran away and they left their money over there. But little did they know that they had really been earning their money so that it would be used to serve God with their money. Okay, so that's what we learned yesterday. Right? Well, if you thought that was strange, and it is strange, so here's something that's really strange. The laws of the Zava and the Zava. There's the laws of the Zava and the Zava. That's essentially when there is an emission from a man or a woman in the places where the differentiations between a man and a woman. So a man, there's some sort of a white, whatever it is, liquid that emanates from that place. And a woman also, well, in the case of the woman, it's actually blood. So we'll see. Let's have a look. Right? Let's have a see. There's Nida, there's Zava. Right? It's actually blood. And by a man, there is a Zav, and there's also a thing called Shichva Zera, which is semen. Comes from it, and it makes them impure for a certain amount of time. So let's look briefly at the sentences, and then we're going to look at the law. We'll go back to this book, which is called Mitzvot HaShem. There we go. And we'll go through these very strange laws. They're very complicated also. You'll see. Now, these laws, all these laws of purity and impurity, are only really relevant in the time of the temple. The time when there's no temple, first of all, you can't bring sacrifices in order to become pure again, to remove the impurity. But also the level of purity, right, is not so great now that it's detrimental to the person or to the situation, to the holiness, because we don't have that same level of holiness as they did in the time of the temple. In the third temple, there will be, but in the third temple, there also won't be impurity. Maybe in the beginning there will. Could be there will be. I mean, there will be cities of refuge, the people that kill others accidentally. So maybe there will be all of these signs in order to refine people, purify people, take away any improper attitudes or ideas that people have, values. That's what's hidden inside, and it comes out in the form of, okay, right, here we go. Let's not get so philosophical, let's get into the laws. By Dabru el ben Israel, God said to Moshe and Aaron, Dabru ben Israel, speak to the Jewish people. Excuse me one moment, excuse me. Now it's also, by the way, last little idea here. This is proper, in a way that we should read this before Passover, because before Passover, all the Jewish people went to the Holy Temple, and there was a Holy Temple. So everybody had to be in a state of purity. Can't touch any dead bodies or have this Zav or Ziva or Matzora. They couldn't go to the temple if they were in that situation. By the Hashem Moshe of Aaron, God spoke to Moses and Aaron, and he said, Dabru b'nei Israel, speak to the Jewish people, Amartam, and speak to them, and say them. Amartam alhem, speak to them, and say to them. Ish, any person, ki yezav mi basoro. If there is flowing from his skin, zovo tamehu, then it's impure. It's an impure flow. Okay, it says Rashi, let's just do a little Rashi and then we'll go to the laws. You might think from any place that it emanates, like sweat or something like that, comes from his nose, right? Comes some sort of emanation from his nose, mucus or something like that. Talmud says mi besoro. It says some place from his flesh and not any place in his flesh. After the Torah makes a difference between flesh and flesh. In other words, not all places. After the Torah tells us about the letters of impurity, which are in the Tzorat, this color or that color. So now we have the laws of the Zav and the Zava. What's a Zav is only from a place where there is, how do you say, a light level, a non-severe level of impurity. Nida metamis chamura, and Nida can be a severe type of impurity. We'll see what this means. And a Ziva, Afazav, also the place. This is from the place where there can be two levels of impurity, light and heavy. Keri and Matame Tuma. So if a person has seminal emission, and also a Ziva, a Zav and a Ziva, that's more severe. This tells you Zava, Zovo Tame, anything that flows out of him. This tells you that even a little drop. Now, like I said, it doesn't exist anymore, this level of tumor. Zov, Damalimi Batsek, it says Zov, this emission that comes from a sexual organ. This is similar to, it's very thick. It's very thick, and it's very, how do you say, opaque. The dome, the loven beitza hamuzar, it's something like the white of an egg. And shichva zera is like, one second. It's not, it's the Ziva, a Zav is thicker, and Siman is less thick. Okay, we're going to learn the details of this in a moment. Zostia Tumaso, this is what it is. Ror Basaro et Zovo, O Hechtim Basaro Mizovo Tumasohu. Says what happens, it means that if it flows, if it's clear, or it's very thick, then it's impure. Okay, so it's not, let's get into the legal aspect of it. Let's just, instead of translating, instead of getting to the laws, we'll get to the laws when we read the Mitzvot HaShem. Ready? Call a mishkav sheish kavalav. If a person has this emission, which is called a zav, then he's impure. And anything that he sits on it becomes impure. What do you mean impure? It can't be taken into the holy temple. It can't, and it can make other people impure also. But call a kli in any vessel that if he happens to sit on it, a table or something, a chair, also becomes impure. That's what's called mishkav and moshav. Right? If a person sits on a thing or he lays down on it, makes it impure. Not all things make a person impure. Not all things can a person make impure by sitting on them, and not every person can make things impure. Like there's different levels of impurity. A person that has a dead body, for instance, has certain impurities that it doesn't imply, doesn't pass on. A person that touches something that a zav sat on or laid down on, he has to wash his garments. In other words, he puts his garments in the mikveh, and he himself has to go to the mikveh, and that day he is impure until he goes to the mikveh. When he goes to the mikveh, he's impure until the nighttime. Also, a person who sits on something that a zav sat on, same thing. He has to immerse his clothes in a mikveh, and he has to wash. He has to immerse himself also in a mikveh. A person who touches a zav himself, if I touch someone who is a zav, or if he touches me, then to wash, I have to take my garments and put them into the mikveh, and also I myself have to go into the mikveh, and until I do that, I am impure. Even after I go into the mikveh, which I go in the mikveh in the daytime, only the Nida goes in the nighttime. When he goes in the daytime, he's impure until the sun sets. If a zav spits on someone that's pure, he'll wash his garments and water, and he'll be impure until the evening. Okay, now a person, of course, can ask himself, hey, what book is this? What are we reading this from? Where did this come from? This is the holy Torah that God gave to the Jewish people. What in the world is holy about this? This is exactly the opposite. This is real holiness. This is real holiness. These are things that defile true holiness. That's the whole idea of holy. Namely, it is exactly according to God's will, and it reveals God's will. What are these things got to do with it? This is God's will. This is what God decided. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have had these laws, but it's not up to me. So we see that this is a totally incomprehensible thing. Why would God care about this and in such detail? We're going to see how the details are in a moment. Call him Mirkov. What is a Mirkov? Mirkov means even though a person doesn't something, that a person doesn't sit on it. Mirkov. This is like someone that sits, let's say, on a saddle, or he puts something over the saddle and he sits on it, he puts something over that. And with the bottom thing that he sits on, everything that he sits on, all the way down, all becomes impure. Mirkov means to ride, if you sit on it riding. Call on the Gale, but call a Shiri. Anything that touches on any one of the vessels that are below this Zav, if he's sitting on something, let's see, he's riding on it, and he sits. This is worse than if it's something that is just, if he just sits on it. This is talking about he sits on it, like riding on a horse or a wagon or something like that. This is a different weird impurity that it is more severe than if he sits on a chair or on a bed. If he sits on a bed or in a chair, then the top level is impure. But Mirkav, he says, this is it. It says, Behu Chomer Bishka. This is Bolmod ala Mirkav. That anything that touches it is impure. A person is impure. But a person does not have to wash his garments, which a person that does with a mishkav, a bed, or a mirkav, or he sits, something that he sits on or that he lays down, he does have to. Strange law. Right? Any parts of the animal is riding on a wagon, for instance, and he touches the reins of the horse, anything that's part of this, this is also called mirkav. That's what he says. Even though he's not sitting on anything, for instance, he grabs a hold of the sargan, the otsov, the reins of the horse. It makes it impure because of mirkav, and also the bit of the horse. It also becomes. Let's have a look at this. Okay. Kli cheres, if a zav touches a clay vessel made of clay, you have to break it. You can't fix it up. But if it's a vessel of wood or metal, yishatef b'mayim, he can immerse it in water. And this is where the term comes, keli shatef, means any vessels that can be purified in water by immersing it. A clay vessel cannot. Okay, how does the person become refined again, pure again? When he wants to become pure, what does he have to do? He has to count a man that has this emission. This is not a seminal emission. We'll learn about the seminal emission in a moment. He has to count 7 days, and then he immerses his garments in water. He himself goes in water, in mayim chayim, but it has to be living water. Living water that comes from a spring. It has to be 7 days that he didn't see any. On the 8th day, he takes 2 birds, or either 2 older birds, or younger birds, doves, pigeons, and he comes in front of God. Some people say Turim and Bnei Yonah are 2 different. Some people say it's just different ages. In any case, we'll know when the 3rd temple comes. Goes to he gives these birds to the Kohen, and the Kohen sacrifices them. One is a chatas, and then one is an ola, and this brings him. The person is declared to be pure. Okay, what if a man, comes out of him a seminal emission? Then he goes into the mikveh, and not his garments, and he is impure until the evening. Also, any garments or leather which is on him, that falls on it, if the siman falls on it, not what he's wearing, but if a bit of the siman falls on it, then it also has to go to the water. It has to be immersed in a mikveh, and it's impure until the evening. Okay, a woman that has relations with her husband, and there's semen, so she has to go to the mikveh, and she becomes impure until the evening. Now, this is only if she wants to go into the holy temple. She's impure. A woman, okay, now the laws of a woman, if she has an emission of blood. So if it comes out even Zava b'basaro, 7 days she's in her, she's impure, and anyone touches her becomes impure until the evening. Anything she lays down upon it becomes impure. Anything she sits on it becomes impure. Anyone who touches those things that she sat on becomes impure. Anyone that touches a vessel that she sat on it, even if it's not a chair, then he has to go to the mikveh. His garments become impure. He has to go to the mikveh. His garments also. Okay, let's learn exactly what these laws are. This is the laws of Shechva Zera, of semen. And if the woman is, okay, what if a woman has an emission of blood? Okay, this is talking about Ziva. This is talking about also blood flows, but there's a big difference if blood comes from her 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. 3 days, she also has to bring a sacrifice. We'll see. excuse me. A woman, if she has blood many days, below 8 Nida, not in the normal time when she's supposed to have a menstruation. Usually there's you can determine once a month, it's supposed to be, or if she has a regular time, or tazo, if she has, the days that she flows blood, she is impure. Anything she sits on, it becomes impure. Anything she touches, she wants to become pure from this many days, so she has to have 7 days without any blood, and then she is pure. On the 8th day, she takes 2 birds or pigeons, or 2 pigeons, young pigeons, older pigeons, or doves, or pigeons, and she brings them to the Kohen and to the open, and the Kohen makes one chatas and one an ola, just like with the man, same thing. Hizartem, warn the Jewish people from the impurity, so they shouldn't die with their impurity by coming into the temple impure. Right? It's a punishment of death. Hari akoris, what the death from heaven. From heaven. In other words, the impurification, coming into the temple impure, brings what's called cutting off. The person doesn't live long. There's different interpretations of what it means. But in any case, it's a curse from God, a physical curse that comes out to a person that comes in impure into the temple. So they have to be very careful. This is the law of the Zav. It comes from Shich Vazera, Tumabo, Dava, etc. Okay, now with the Metzora, it has to be a Kohen that declares the person impure. Here, it doesn't have to be a Kohen, a person that declares himself. And today, women do have the laws of impurity, but only in relation to having relations with their husband. There are times of the month when the woman suspects she's going to have menstruation, and there's times when she actually does have that. And there's different periods that are impure. That you have to learn the laws of Nida. If a woman, that's called also the laws of family purity. But let's learn, one moment here, let's learn over here. Oh, there we go. Ready? Yes. Am I doing right here? 1 minute. Sorry. There we go. Right, we'll learn a little bit of this because you're going to see in a moment how massive these laws are. Okay, so we learned these are the laws over here. We just finished learning. Where's the pointer? Where is my pointer? Okay. So here we learned the laws of the house, right? About impure house. That we learned yesterday. Here we go. Positive commandment that a zav should be impure and make other things pure. A metame, like it says, ish ki yeh zav mi basar, just like we finished learning. Tamehu, a zav, this is an emission that comes from the sexual organ of a man. Ve'eno yotzoi bekishoy, not when he has an erection. This has nothing to do with sexual relations. This is a certain disease, whatever. Kamo shich, which is not the case. Semen comes out, the person has an erection. There's no desire or pleasure involved. Lohana. Ellen nigrar b'yotze me'aver mate. It just feels like there's some sort of, it feels like whatever it is, sort of thick water that comes out. Keha kaloven beitza, and it's very opaque, like the white of an egg. Mazura v'shichvas zera lavana, but Siman is white. It's white and more, what do you say, colored. Okay, in any case, a person that sees one time, one day, he sees Zov, whether he sees a little bit, whether he sees a long time flowing from himself. It has to be not the time from Tevila Sofeg, the time it takes, if from the beginning of this emission that he has is, to the end, is the same time that it would take a person to immerse in a mikvah, come out and dry himself off. How long is that? 5 minutes, I don't know, 5 minutes. Afilu pasuk hazav ben time, even if there is interruption between them, this is called one sighting. In other words, within that 5 minute period, that's called seeing once. Harihu Balkiri, then he is the same thing as a person that saw Siman. And what's the law? Then, even though he didn't see Siman, he saw this, what's called Zav. But if it was short, only one time, then he immerses and on that day, and in the evening, he can go into the Holy Temple. Of course, there's no Holy Temple in the nighttime, but at least he can touch things that are relevant to the Holy Temple. If he's a Kohen, he can touch Truma in the nighttime. What if he sees twice? Right? He sees, let's say, 5 minute period, and then it goes over that 5 minute period, however long. Or even if he saw once that from the beginning until the end was longer than the time, let's see, this 5 minute time that it takes to immerse in a mikveh and dry off. Or he saw once that was short at the end of the day and a little bit in the nighttime, even though that it's not long as two, right? So if he sees one sighting that's really long, right? There's an emanation comes from him for a long time, more than 5 minutes, even if it breaks up once, or let's say he sees not one long one, he sees very short, a little bit comes out one day and a little comes out the next day. What's the next day? The nighttime. So a little bit before night, a little bit down. This is called two sightings. If he has two sightings, she'ayamim mitchalkim riyad, because the setting of the sun divides, or he saw two sightings in 2 separate days, basically the same thing. This is called a zav bal shtei riot. Then he has not got the same law of this lenient law of a person that just sees siman, has a seminal emission, but umetame kelim, then he becomes impure. Vessels, if he touches them, people, if he touches a person, anything he lifts up, anything he sits down. Lifting up means even if he doesn't, let's say he's sitting on a what do they call those things? Teeter-totter, whatever. He sits down and somebody else lifts somebody else up on the other side. Right? Let's say he sits on one side of a long bench, and the bench is not studied. He lifts up the other person. That person becomes impure, even if he doesn't touch him. Moshe of America. Okay, that's not a good example because he's also sitting on a chair, so a chair automatically becomes impure. But if, let's say, he pulls out a pulley, something like that, he pushes down pushes down on the chair. Doesn't sit on the chair. He pushes down on it and lifts somebody else up on the other side. That's called lifting him up, and it makes the person impure. That's if he sees two sightings, or one sighting which is longer than 5 minutes, or in 2 different days. And here it is. All these are different details about what happens if he sees 3 sightings. See, this is really long, huh? Really long laws. Okay, it says he has to have immersion, but not just in a regular mikveh. He has to have immersion in spring water, and living water, and etc. Okay, let's not go too much into detail about this because there's a lot of detail, thank God. And what if he has 3 sightings? If he has 3 sightings, then he's got to bring a sacrifice. Here we talked about all these laws about what happens when a person sees 2 sightings. If he sees 1 sighting, then he's just pure for a few hours until the nighttime. If he sees 2 sightings, then he can make things impure. He can make things impure. And he has to have 7 days. He has to count 7 clean days. But he doesn't have to bring a sacrifice. A person that if he sees 3 days in a row, 3 days in a row, this is Zov, then it's the same thing as if he sees twice. He makes things impure and etc. And he has to go to the mikveh, has to count 7 days. But when he makes himself pure, he has to bring a sacrifice to the temple. Then that's the person that has to bring the 2 birds, like we talked about. One is a chatas, one is an ola, and etc. This is after he immerses himself after 7 nikim. So if he sees 1 time, then he's impure for 1 day. If he sees 2 times or 3 times, then he's impure. He has to have 7 clean days of not seeing anything. And all that time, anything that he sits on or he lays down on or he lifts up, if a person touches him or he touches somebody, that person becomes impure like a person that has seminal emission. He's impure that day. Than anyone who touches. But if he sees 3 times, then he is impure for 7 days and has all those laws. He is impure, and he has to have 7 clean days. But after that, he has to bring sacrifices. It says this is only in the time of the Holy Temple. It says, here's an interesting law. Let's just the previous law, we talked about this impurity. So here he's talking about all these levels of impurity. Not that he doesn't have to bring a sacrifice, right? We said if he sees only 1 time or 2 times, then he's impure. So listen, look what he reads over here. He writes that this law is applicable now. He said that same thing about the Metzora, that it's applicable now if you have somebody who knows the different colors. But if it would be now, I don't know. I have to look into it. I mean, how could he say now? Because there's no temple. But in any case, let's see. He says, V'zav nikotame, a person that has this thing of the zav, that he sees this weird emission, he is impure anytime, any place, anytime. This refers to Israel, outside of Israel, in the time of the temple or not. Avonatenu or rabim, but in our many sins, it's the abbreviation. She'ein lanu mikdash, we don't have a temple. V'taharos, and there is no laws of purity and impurity. Ein l'chashvu mitzvah, it's not a mitzvah which is done nowadays. Became kol dini tuma, all the other laws that we had, mitzvah and all of them, these laws of purity and impurity. Ein l'chashvu mitzvahs is not a commandment that is done now. I saw one place that it says that nowadays there are 613 commandments, but nowadays there's only 270 of them are really applicable today because there's no temple. And also all the Jews aren't living in the land of Israel. So a lot of the laws like the Jubilee year and things like that, they're not applicable. So only 270, Aniyah Shena and Libi Er, it says only 270 of them are applicable for this day. Okay, also the same thing as a person that has a seminal emission, it's also impure. And then the laws of a woman, Nida, that she sees, this is blood, this is seeing blood. There's no two different types of color. And the different impurities that she has, like I said, these impurities don't apply now, but they do apply to making it forbidden for her to have sexual relations, and even more than that. Now they also made all sorts of things you have to keep distancing yourself, not only if she sees blood, but also that you suspect that she will see blood, and etc., which you'll learn when Jewish people, any Jewish people who are watching this, will learn when you get married. Only applicable to Jews. That's another good reason. If you were considering converting, not to do it, because these are laws are only, these restrictions are only applicable to Jewish people. Have a good day with Mashiach now, God willing, tomorrow, 8:15. We'll meet again. And we'll see what we'll do tomorrow, because we basically finished this Torah portion for this week. We talked about the portion. We'll see what we do. See you at 8:15 tomorrow morning. God bless you all. Yechia Melech. Have a good day. We should all be dancing in Jerusalem tomorrow with Mashiach.